All right, let's jump right in. Today, we are digging into the invisible architecture behind absolutely everything we claim to know. We're talking about the very foundation of our beliefs.
And that's really the big question, isn't it? We're about to take a hard look at the blueprint for our beliefs. The very ground that our entire understanding of the world is built on. So, before you can build any structure of knowledge, you have to understand the plan. And in philosophy, we call that plan our epistemic foundations. Now, just think of these foundations as the often invisible blueprint for everything we think is true. They're the rules that decide what even gets to count as evidence in the first place. Okay, let's get to work. We're going to start by digging down to the core materials that we build with, and a lot of the time, we don't even realize we're using them. We'll start with the things we just accept. I know, it sounds a little weird, right? To start with things we don't prove. But honestly, every single system of thought, whether it's math or science, it has to begin somewhere. These are the non-negotiable starting points. An axiom is that solid ground we decide to stand on before we even lay the first brick. Like in geometry, an axiom is the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Or in many legal systems, a core axiom is you're innocent until proven guilty. They're just the starting blocks. Okay, so once we have those axioms, we start to build frameworks on top of them. And these systems, well, they act like really powerful filters that influence how we evaluate pretty much everything we see and hear. This is where it gets personal. Our cultural context, our upbringing, it all comes together to shape our entire house of knowledge. For example, a scientific worldview and a religious worldview are two totally different belief systems that can look at the exact same evidence and come to wildly different conclusions. But wait, let's go one layer deeper. Because underneath our axioms and our belief systems, there are these unspoken assumptions that just have to be true for a conversation about knowledge to even get off the ground.
So what this means is that a huge part of our foundation is already in place before we look at a single piece of evidence. A classic presupposition is the assumption that our senses give us reliable info about the world. We don't prove it, right? We just have to accept it to even start doing science. So if an axiom is the first brick we lay, a presupposition is the bedrock the entire construction site sits on.
All right, let's move on to the actual construction phase. The foundation is set, so what tools and procedures do we use to build upwards from there?
This four-step process is basically how we turn raw materials into a solid structure. First, you gather evidence, the raw data, the observations. Then, step 2, you apply logic to make sure you're connecting those facts correctly, so your reasoning doesn't have any holes. Third, you use a clear methodology, like a repeatable recipe, so other people can check your work. And finally, you provide justification. You have to explain why your conclusion holds up. This is what separates a rigorous argument from just an opinion.
But, no house is safe without a thorough inspection. And the exact same thing is true for our structures of knowledge. How do we make sure that what we've built is actually going to stand?
This whole thing is a delicate dance. It's an interplay between feeling really sure about something, what we call certainty, and also being willing to question it. And that is the crucial role of doubt. Now, this is the really cool part. Doubt isn't a weakness here. It's an absolutely essential quality control tool. See, certainty gives our beliefs stability, right? But doubt is the force that pushes us to make them better, to refine them. It's what keeps our beliefs from becoming rigid and dogmatic. And this isn't something that just happens. It's not passive. We have to actively and deliberately poke and prod at our own intellectual structures to make sure they're robust enough to hold up under pressure. So these two actions, questioning our assumptions and systematically examining the evidence, they're basically like stress tests for our beliefs. They're what ensures the whole structure can actually withstand scrutiny, both from ourselves and from other people. So after all this work, laying the foundations, building with the right tools, testing the whole thing for strength, what is the finished house we're even trying to create? What does knowledge actually look like in the end?
See, it's not just about piling up a bunch of disconnected facts. It's about achieving several key goals that give our beliefs real weight and credibility.
And achieving these goals, well, that's what separates a solid structure of knowledge from just a pile of opinions. We start with warrant. That's having good reasons to justify our belief. Then comes validity, making sure our reasoning is sound. This builds understanding, where we can see how all the pieces fit together. Of course, the ultimate goal is truth, hoping our beliefs align with reality. And when all these things work together, they yield our final degree of confidence in the claim.
Okay, this is one of the toughest moments in anyone's intellectual life. Sometimes the most rigorous thing you can do isn't to just patch up the house, but to be brave enough to tear the whole thing down and start over from scratch.
This really comes down to intellectual courage. It's about making sure our strongest beliefs are actually resting on genuine justification, not just on tradition or, inertia. It's asking yourself, if I were starting from zero today, would I still believe this?
This quote just nails it, doesn't it? What we find, what we know, it's never just a neutral fact. It's the end product of this entire foundational structure we've just walked through. Which really leaves us with one critical question to think about. What are your foundations built on?